In this series of mentoring, we're talking about getting acquainted. And I told you a little bit of my origin story. So let me tell you now about the call to ministry. One of the things that I want to happen here is as I talk about things in my life, I'm really hoping that you think about things in your life. So I'm telling you stories not to say this is the way it should be. I'm telling you stories so you can think about your own, because that's really what I want you to concentrate on. So when I felt a call to ministry, I felt like God was asking me to serve Him, to follow Him, and to be available to Him. It looked different at different times in my life. The very first call was a call to go to a church in Kansas City. And my wife, Belinda, and I drove from Western Kansas, where I had been living with my parents in my college days, to Kansas City. From the west to the east, as we're driving into the city limits of Kansas City, there's a place in I-70 that looks over and you can see the whole skyline of Kansas City. When I saw the skyline, something happened that I didn't expect. I thought I got a prompting from God that was something like this, like, put your roots down here, live your whole life in this city, invest yourself here. And that was surprising. I know a lot of pastors move every 5 to 7 years or so. And I thought, I don't know if this came from God or not, but I filed it away and I thought, I'm going to keep referencing back to this. And now I can tell you 44 years later, I turned down every opportunity to go anywhere else and have invested in myself in Kansas City. And I think I did hear from God. So I want to encourage you to ask yourself this question. What's your commitment or call to ministry? Are you flexible with all the different changes that might take place along the way? And what's your call to the place where you are? Because I think that God not only has a call to surrender and service, but has a call to a place. And I hope you can identify that. The way mine worked in Kansas City was, first I was a pastor for 7.5 years at a small church. The church grew a lot. Inside of that time, that season, my wife, Belinda, and I felt like God wanted us to plant a church. We had never planted a church. We didn't even know anybody who was planting a church. All I knew was they planted churches in Acts, and Acts was full of church plants. And so we had the courage to follow God, and man, was it an adventure. And that church plant led us to 11 years in rented facilities, setting up and tearing down. Eventually, we were able to buy land and to begin building what turned out to be 3 phases of buildings, and eventually $27 million worth of buildings. And God grew that church from 27 people, or 7 families essentially, to over 2,500 people. But I'm going to skip the war stories and go back to what I mentioned at the beginning of this mentoring moment, is the importance of understanding that when you surrender your life, you surrender to a call to ministry. And I want to encourage you to believe that God will have that be different at different times in your life. The next thing I talk to you about, I'll talk about becoming a citywide leader. And God takes us through processes. So surrender, but be open to the ways it might change. And specifically look for the call God has in this place, this time, with this people. And consider that God has you where He wants you to be for this place and this time.